Hi. So, for those of us that don't know, could you introduce yourself a little bit?
I'm Rob Connick. I'm the Artistic Director of Lafayette Performing Arts Company, and I'm also the director of our upcoming show, Jet of Blood.
Okay, let's start off then with Jet of Blood. Give us a little bit of your history behind it.
This project has been one at least 8 years in the making. I did my master's and PhD at Bowling Green, and my dissertation was on Antonin Artaud's theater of cruelty aesthetics and how we've already incorporated a great deal of them into theater practices, but people still consider his views and theories flawed and unusable. So this was something that from the very beginning of my dissertation was always a goal, to prove that the stuff that he wrote could be staged and could be done in a way that gets that feel and that theme across. Jet of Blood is a very short script. It's 3 to 7 pages long, depending on the translation. And most people that read it say that it can't be staged because it's got so many different fantastic elements in it, with bodies falling from the sky and frogs and scorpions and assorted insects that move across the stage. And I really wanted to showcase the fact that as a surreal piece, it's not meant to be taken literally. It's not meant to be a realistic portrayal on stage, but instead, what do those words evoke as far as images and movement? And that's what we've tried to do with this.
Okay, so it's great. You've noted some of the challenges that the text brings to you. So what are some of the things that you're doing to overcome those challenges?
One of the things that I think I did in order to make sure that this was more than just a very short piece, again, as a 7-page script, I've seen productions that were 10 minutes long, and I've seen productions that were an hour long. We incorporated 2 other pieces of Artaud's artistic career. One, a radio drama, To Have Done with the Judgment of God. That was the final thing that he did before he passed away. And in that, he switched more to using sound and words as images. And that fit really well with what was going on with Jet of Blood. Some of the themes were the same. The idea of original sin and the story of creation and views on sex and the need to find perfect beauty and the chaotic nature of the universe. All of those work in both of these. We also took the film that he wrote, The Seashell and the Clergyman, that was directed by Germain Dulac, and put it in with this as well. And all 3 of the pieces come together to give a surreal sense of the universe and to show what surrealism can be in different aspects. And I think bringing all of those together helped unify and clarify a bit of some of the staging, but also gave us more to work with and to combat some of those realistic issues. How do you get bodies to fall from the sky? How do you get insects and animals on stage or to crawl out of a person's body? We're using film sequences. The idea that you don't have to see everything on stage to still take part in it and to experience it. You can do a lot with intention and implication through small things that you see either on the stage or on the screen. And that's what we're playing with this.
So with those 3 pieces, you're giving us an evening of Artaud. Now, are they going to be each separate and standing on their own, or is the audience going to be seeing one singular combined piece?
It's one singular combined piece. We took all 3 of them and found ways to intersperse them together. We start and end with sections of Jet of Blood. And one of the things that works nicely about this is that it starts itself as almost a very naive, childlike view of the world. We're looking at it as taking place in a 6 or 7-year-old girl's Barbie house, basically, that she's playing with these dolls, and it's that sense of naivety to the world, and that you can just say I love you and everything is beautiful because you don't know what's going on anywhere else. As that starts to unravel, we use the other pieces to showcase some of the wondrous, strange nature of the universe. That these may not have been intended to go together, but with the surrealism view that everything is just a stream of consciousness, the fact that they don't necessarily tie linearly together doesn't make it a problem. If anything, it helps unify everything, because it kind of reiterates that idea that not everything that we're seeing follows a linear structure, or that has the normal cause and effect reactions on stage.
So at this point, you've been working on Jet of Blood for 8 years.
Yes.
You're technically common law married. What has evolved in the relationship, as it were? When did the honeymoon period end? And at what point in the relationship are you and Jet of Blood at this point?
I think the honeymoon period officially ended when I finished my final draft of my dissertation. When it went to committee, I was hoping there wouldn't be any more changes, because I didn't want to talk about him, do anything with him, read any more of his work for a long, long time. Which is why it's been 2005 plus 2011, 2 years since I graduated till I actually put this work on stage, because I needed some distance from it. I needed the time to quit thinking about Artaud, to quit thinking about the dissertation, and just relax, get it out of my system. I would say about 6 months ago is when I actually got back to it, and I looked at it again and found some things in the normal translations that, looking back at the original French text, I thought could be changed and warranted the change based on the translation, that it wasn't me forcing a reading on it. When I started with Artaud, I felt kind of the same way that many people did, that this was a show that was about violence and kind of negative dark forces. The title Jet of Blood kind of implies that when you hear that and you hear the theater of cruelty, you put blood, cruelty together, and you think of things like Saw and Hostel and cruelty and violence just for cruelty and violence's sake. And that's never what Artaud imagined. He felt that most of the cruelty and most of the violence should not be shown on stage, because when you see it, it becomes unreal. It doesn't have that effect. We know that it's fake. We know that someone's not dying on stage. So it takes that element of danger and fear away from it. Whereas if you give people the sense that something dangerous is going to happen, and they go off stage like the Greeks did, the human mind puts together a much more violent and visceral set of images than we can ever do on stage. So the human imagination works much better than we could ever do, and that's what I think really started to come together with this for me finally, is that you don't have to show everything. You can hint at it and people will put the rest of it together. You don't have to be so upfront and didactic with some of the things that occur. You can hint at it, you can let the audience create those images for themselves.
So with that in mind, and you mentioned this a little bit, just now, about how it's changed and evolved even over the last couple of months that you've picked up the text again. Now that you're working with a group of actors and some technical people in different aspects, what's come alive or changed about the production that maybe you hadn't thought about now that it's getting on its feet, as it were?
Some of the things that have been much different than I imagined were just the way that some of the characters have taken life. We've got one actor who's got a gymnastics background. So where I thought that everything was going to be very mechanical at times, the fact that he's got this background has allowed us to use very fluid movement juxtaposed against very rough, very structured, very robotic movement. And that's been a lot of fun. And what I've opened this up to the actors with is I've given them basic ideas and let them run with it. And they've created their own makeup, their own costumes, and even their own blocking. This has been very improvisational. And they've come up with things to do that I never would have thought of. We've got Chantel in this cast, and she's using her scooter to produce different movement parts and different ways to get across the stage that I never would have thought of, that are working very, very well. And we're finding ways to highlight the differences that people are bringing rather than trying to force specific ideas in there.
Now, this will be, as far as I'm aware, Northwestern Pennsylvania's first experience in potentially a long time, potentially ever, with Arto and some other work, with this theater of cruelty. What are you hoping they take out of it? And what are you really hoping to try to give to them?
The only time that I can think of Arto being done anywhere around here was 4 years ago at Lake Erie College near Cleveland. They did a production, and the person that directed it actually found me and asked if I would be willing to come up and see the production and give my thoughts, because he had read some of my scholarship on Arto. It hasn't been done around here. What I want people to get from it is the idea that goes along with our theme for the season, this theater of cruelty. That cruelty doesn't have to be violence. It doesn't have to be grotesque carnage on stage. It doesn't have to be incredibly explicit, graphic, visceral material. Instead, cruelty is every single moment that we choose to do something that benefits ourselves at the cost of someone else. That we have these cruel moments that we do every day. That there's always something that happens that does affect someone else negatively. That doesn't mean that it's not justified, but there is a cruelty to that, and there's also an inherent cruelty to the world. Artaud mentioned that what he wanted people to get from theater was similar to a trip to the dentist's office. That it's not always going to be pleasant and fun. It's going to be, at times, uncomfortable. It's going to be something that, at times, makes you feel anxious, but that it does something to you that leaves you forever changed for the better. That when we have these moments where cruelty happens, that you realize and don't take for granted all of the kind moments that you have. He continually talked about how there are, whether you call it God or fate or just chaos, there is a sword of Damocles that hangs over every one of our heads that we don't know is there. At any moment, life could end or change irreparably for anyone. And we don't like to think about how fragile our state of mind and our state of being and our livelihood is. Theater can address that, and it can hopefully make us appreciate the things that we have by bringing that fear of these cruel things that could happen out.
Now, with this experience, have you given any thought, as it were, to the future? If you want to bring other works of Artaud to the stage, numerous pieces, to the area which hasn't had that experience as of yet?
Well, with the 3 that we've done, there's only one more extant piece of performance that Artaud has left, and that's his translation of the Cenci. And it's incredibly grand in scope. It reads like a Shakespearean tragedy, and eventually I would love to stage that. I've been working on a translation of it that I think does it justice better as a stage production. The standard English version is a great version to read, but it was done by a literary surrealist who approached it as a text rather than a performance piece. And that would be something that I eventually would like to do, because that was the only play that Artaud wrote after he wrote his Theater of Cruelty manifestos. So that one was created with those ideas in mind. Jet of Blood was written before it, but I think by looking at it compared to what he wrote about what theater should be like, you can see those ideas already existing kind of in a latent state in this script. As far as other works though, I think so much of his Theater of Cruelty comes out in many people who have both acknowledged that they've been influenced by his work or just come out as inherent once you know what his ideals were. I know Jerzy Grotowski was very heavily influenced by Artaud, and Peter Brook had some Artaud, Schechner had some Artaud. So some of these other things that we've used to some extent that were influenced by the living theater, our translations of the Greeks, for example, are based on living theater ideas that were themselves based on Artaud's ideas. And the ideas of soundscapes that we take for granted now was something that hadn't been done before Artaud did it in his production of the Cenci. That stereo surround sound and very specific spots for sound to come from was a Theater of Cruelty idea. We think of it as just kind of common theater now, but at that time in the 1940s, that was revolutionary. The fact that you would do that and bring attention to a spot not on the stage was almost heretical, that people never thought that it would last because it was just a fad. People didn't get it, it didn't fit with the common norms. Those are the things that I think more than anything will be what we have as a lasting legacy to my studies and my research.
Now, how has as a whole, with the work that you've been doing, with it, being part of your thesis and dissertations, how has the work of Artaud and the Theater of Cruelty affected you as an artist as a whole? I mean, what aspects do you find, even if you're doing something entirely that would appear unrelated, how have you found it affecting you and your aesthetic?
My approach as a director and acting coach has changed drastically because of Artaud's ideas and theories that I've read. He focused very much on the idea that each actor is an athlete, that you have to train your body to do all of the different things that it does. So the actor-athlete has to have complete control of their body, their breath, their voice, that their voice is a muscle. It's a skill set that needs to be trained and rehearsed and practiced. Their breathing has to be trained and rehearsed so that you can do all of these wonderful things with your body that you might not normally think of. Some of the other things that he did that I incorporate were based on the idea that a good theater piece can be seen by somebody who doesn't know that language and still get caught up in what's being presented on stage and still feel fully invested in it based on what they're seeing from the actor and what they hear in the actor's voice, see in the actor's movement, see in their face. That all of those things come up that either in foreign translation or in silent film, you can see all of this at work. You don't have to be as reliant on the text to tell the story as much as using the text to enhance the story, using the text as one piece of the actor's tools rather than the primary guiding force. So even on realistic stage plays, that's still something that I think comes out with what I do, is seeing how the intentions affect the actor and then how that actor embodies that, how does that affect what's said on stage?
Excellent. Thank you so much for your time, sir.
Certainly.